الموت وقال كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام سبحان من لا يخفى عليه اختلاف النيات ولا يعزب عنه معاصي العباد في الخلوات سبحان الله الذي منه خلقه العباد وإليه المعاد فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يرى ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يرى نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو الملك الذي لا ينازع في ملكه ولا يضاد في حكمه يعذب من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء ويرحم من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء تعذيبه المسيء عدل وعفوه تفضل ونشهد أن محمدا سيد المرسلين وخير المبشرين والمنذرين صلى الله عليه وآله الهداة المهديين من ركب سفينتهم نجا واهتدى ومن تخلف عنها ذل فغرق وهوى أوصيكم عباد الله بالاعتصام بالتقوى فإنه حبل متين وعروة الوثقى قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقان الحميد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم آمنا بالله وصدق الله العلي العظيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 59 tells us, O you who believe, obey Allah and obey the Messenger and those vested in authority from among you. Our discussions have been on the fundamental doctrine of Islam, which is Tawheed, and at the moment we are discussing the shirk in obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is part of the 5 types of shirk. The first is shirk in the essence of Allah. Second is the shirk in attributes of Allah. Third is the shirk in the actions of Allah. And finally, the 5th one is shirk in the worship, ibadah of Allah, which we have yet to discuss. A very quick recap from last week. We have been discussing those who cannot qualify for being Ulil Amr. Allah in the Qur'an has told us that Rasulullah is the first category after him to be obeyed without any condition, without any reservation. And the second category is the qualities of those people who are called Ulil Amr. So we have been looking at who do not qualify. And last week we discussed very briefly, because this is an address to those who have brought faith, we were looking at the Khulafa. The third Khalifa, which was Uthman bin Affan, who does not qualify, we discussed last week, as the Ulil Amr, because of his blatant violations of the commands of Allah, the non-compliance to the Sunnah of Rasulullah, and not even adhering to his own pledges of the conditions of Khilafah that were given to him by his own people who put him there. And Uthman's strengthening of the Banu Umayyah in power despite being the cursed tree in the Qur'an, and as well as Rasulullah's ample ahadith. So before we look at who is the Ulil Amr and who qualifies to be Ulil Amr, we still want to look at 1 or 2 personalities so that we may understand it comprehensively, inshallah. So the next one, before we discuss Amir al-Mu'mineen, the next personality we want to discuss is Muawiya bin Abi Sufyan. And let us look at his Khilafah before we go to the Khilafah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, which inshallah we will do very soon. Before we even look at his Khilafah, let us look at his Islam, how he brought Islam. And this is very important because it shaped the history of Muslims after Rasulullah. Rasulullah at the onset and throughout his lifetime gave no prominence to Abu Sufyan or his family. Because Abu Sufyan was a staunch enemy of Islam, the message of Islam as well as Rasulullah. And the fact remains that Abu Sufyan fought blatantly and fought long wars with Rasulullah and Islam for 13 years that Rasulullah propagated in Makkah, as well as 8 years after migration also. He became a Muslim at the conquest of Makkah. And one of the main reasons history records is they became Muslims not out of choice, but only because they were conquered. Now, when the conquest of Mecca happened, and Abu Sufyan gave in to Rasulullah and accepted to have been conquered and accepted Islam so that he may save himself, Muawiya ran away from Mecca and wrote a stinking letter to his father for having accepted Islam and having accepted to have been conquered. He ran away and did not come for almost a year before he finally did come to Makkah, and that is after his father told him to accept Islam, even if it meant just on the face of it. How did Muawiya come to power in the first place? He was a nobody. However, the elite of the Quraysh played lots of games from the last year of Rasulullah's life onwards for a very long time. And after Rasulullah's departure from this world, the Khulafa of the Muslims began their conquests of neighboring lands, and this was not Islamic faith, or they were not fighting to defend Islam, but rather they were on their expansion of the Muslim kingdom. There is a difference between Islamic faith and defending Islam and expansion because of Muslim kingdom. Muslim kingdom would mean the kingdom of Muslims, those who had brought faith. And one such conquest was Greater Sham, in which the second Khalifa had deputed an army to conquer Sham. Sham is that place that includes what we currently know as Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, even Jerusalem, and Syria. His brother, Muawiya's brother Yazid bin Abu Sufyan, was the head of that mission, and Muawiya was his deputy. But Yazid bin Abu Sufyan, out of outbreak of disease, died within the very first year after having conquered Sham, and therefore Muawiya came to power. When he came to power, he started converting people to Islam in that region, but he invited them to the Islam of Abu Sufyan and not the Islam of Rasulullah. He went to the extent of portraying himself as the Ahlul-bayt of Rasulullah rather than the Ahlul-bayt of Ahlul Kisa and those that have been made pure, thoroughly purified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. And he fought two Imams of Ahlul Kisa, and we will come to this particular point later on inshallah today. He fought Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayk in the battle of Siffin, and he also drew his sword towards Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba salawatullahi wa salamu alayk. And thereafter he declared himself as the Khalifa of Muslims, having signed a peace treaty with Imam Hassan alayhi salam. Now, when he was in Sham, he fed the people of Sham with lots of lies through the Banu Umayyah. And whilst the third Khalifa put Muawiya there, the second Khalifa rather, put Muawiya in that position, it is Uthman ibn Affan who strengthened his hold on Sham. His propaganda machines were against Amir al-Mu'mineen, and the media churned lies every single day. Now, when we talk of media, maybe the media at that time was not the media that we have today, but the concept remains the same. Even today we see there is a lot of twists and turns in the media that we see. There are things that are not there being reported. Certain times news are even created without them being any news. And this is the reason what he gave his own people is that the only way the Banu Umayyah cannot be the Khulafa of the Muslimin, which his father had dreamt of all his life, is if the truth comes out, and therefore the media has to be above the truth. When Aisha, the wife of Rasulullah, raised the false flag, what we call false flag today, of avenging Uthman's assassination by accusing Amir al-Mu'mineen for it, Muawiya jumped on the boat as it served his interests. The Battle of Jamal then ensued. His propaganda was so much that he tirelessly went against degrading the Ahlul-bayt alayhimus salam, and specifically Amir al-Mu'mineen. He is also the one who began the la'na upon Amir al-Mu'mineen in every Friday khutbah all across the Muslim world. Muawiya, having taken power, adopted a dual strategy. What we see today in our current politics as well. There is a domestic policy and there is a foreign policy. The domestic policy was that for the region of Sham, to enhance the Islam of Abu Sufyan, manipulating events and strengthening the media. As for the foreign policy, which was outside Sham, he used the carrot and stick policy. The carrots were for those who could be corrupted, and they were given the carrots to be happy with, so that they would go away from the real Islam, while the stick policy was for those who were incorruptible, as we say, and who refused to be bought off. For them, they were persecuted, killed, their property confiscated. Imam Abu Hanifa, who is also known as Imam al-Azam and one of the greatest of the four Sunni Imams, and a student of our sixth Imam, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayh, was a 2nd century scholar. Imam Abu Hanifa was during the Khilafat of Banu Abbas, and it is he and during his time that coined the title of Khulafa Ar-Rashidun, meaning the rightly guided Khulafa. He unequivocally declared that the first 3 Khulafa plus Imam Ali alayhi salam were the only people who qualified to be Khulafa of Rashidun. And he explicitly refused to endorse Muawiya as from Khulafa Ar-Rashidun because of the wars that he raised against Imam Ali and Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and therefore spilled the blood of so many innocent Muslims. A very famous statement of Muawiya after the treaty that was signed under deceit with Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he came to the people of Kufa. He tore that paper on which there was signatures of the treaty. He put it under his feet and addressed the people of Kufa and said, "I never fought you so that I may make you pray or fast or obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I fought you only so that I may rule upon you." And he reneged on all his policies and all the terms of the treaty almost immediately. Now, when we look at the functions of Ulil Amr, it is a message of Islam that was taught by all prophets and all messengers, perfected by Rasulullah. In a nutshell, has 4 main things. One is to organize and the personal as well as the social affairs of the people, to reform and practice the path of Rasulullah, the Sunnah of Rasulullah, to protect the doctrines and laws from corruption, and to uphold the moral values as required by Allah. Anybody who does not fit in these four categories cannot be an Ulil Amr. It is therefore very safe to conclude that the primary function of Ulil Amr is to lead the Ummah in all aspects towards the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to be in charge of the Ummah. Now, there is a very interesting event in the life of Shaykh Mufeed. Shaykh Mufeed is a Shia scholar of the 4th century, a Shia alim of very high esteem and repute. His name was Muhammad bin Nu'man and was also known as Ibn Muallim until he was given the title of Al-Mufeed. The title of Al-Mufeed was given to him by none other than the Imam of our time, Imam Al-Hujjah Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. And the meaning of Mufeed means a person who is not only useful but also beneficial to others. Shaykh Mufeed had students like Sayyid Murtada Alam al-Huda and his brother Sharif al-Radi, the compiler of Nahjul Balagha, two extremely important alims of very high prominence amongst the Shias. He had a dream in which he saw Janab Fatimatul Zahra salawatullah wasalamu alayha coming with her two sons and saying, "O Shaykh, teach these two sons of mine." And the very next day he sees that a lady comes with Sayyid Murtada and Sharif al-Radi and uses the same words, "O Shaykh, teach my two sons." Shaykh Mufeed was also a teacher of Shaykh Tusi, the founder of Hawza Ilmiya of Najaf, which ran for 1,000 years until Saddam removed it and killed it altogether. Shaykh Mufeed, when he was still a student, was sent by his teacher to another teacher by the name of Ali bin Isa al-Rumani, who was from the Ahl-Sunnah. But he was a very prominent alim of the Ahl-Sunnah and had lots of students in his class. And he attracted all that because of his logical and rational discussions that he used to have in class. The very first day that Shaykh Mufeed was in his class, a man from Basra walks in and posed a question to the teacher and says, "O Muallim, how do you view the event of Ghadir compared to the event of the Ghar? Ghadir is where Amir al-Mu'mineen was declared as the Mawla of Mu'mineen, whilst the event of Ghar is the event of the cave in which during Hijrah, Abu Bakr was accompanying Rasulullah in that cave." There is a very interesting discussion about that. However, the answer that the teacher gave is that in Islam there are two things that are the principles of looking at any event: a Rivaya or a Diraya. A Rivaya is a mere narration, whilst a Diraya is a recognized event. And according to that teacher, Ghadir was a Rivaya, but the event of Ghar was a Diraya, which had more importance than Ghadir. So thereafter, Shaykh Mufeed posed a question to him. And he said, "O my teacher, what do you say about the one who fights a just Imam?" And the teacher responded, "Such a person would be a kafir, an infidel, a person who disbelieves in Islam." But after a pause, immediately he corrected himself and rectified and said, "Such a person would be a fasiq," which is a transgressor as a translation, a person who defiantly disobeys Allah. So Shaykh Mufeed asked the teacher, "So what do you say about Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salam alayk?" And the scholar immediately responded, "I firmly believe he was a just Imam." So Shaykh then asked, Then what do you say about the day of Jamal, the battle of Jamal, Talha and Zubair? He stopped at those two names only, he didn't go beyond. The teacher responded, both of them repented. So now Shaykh Mufeed retorted and says the battle of Jamal was a Diraya, a recognized event. The repentance of Talha and Zubair is a Rivaya, a mere narration. Whether it happened or not, we do not know. And immediately the teacher realized what Shaykh Mufeed told him, and thereafter said, surely you are Al-Mufeed. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. In this event, we can very clearly see that in this conversation, that the principle of fighting a just Imam is discussed, and the opinions of the Shias as well as the upright Ahlul Sunnah is no different. Whether it is Muawiya, Yazid bin Muawiya, Talha, Zubair, or any other individual or group, does not matter. Whoever draws a sword against the just Imam is under this category. This is an established principle. And our sixth Imam, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salam alayh, quotes Rasulullah and emphasizes that whoever draws the sword and calls people to obey him, whilst there is a more learned person amongst the Muslims, then he is a straying impostor. He is an impostor. He is no one. The Ahlul-bayt, specifically the Ahlul Kisa, are held in utmost esteem and reverence by all Muslims, irrespective of their sect, as those who have been purified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. A person like Muawiya fought not only Amir al-Mu'mineen and Imam Hassan, who are both members of Ahlul Kisa. Such a person, according to all Muslims, is in the category of having abundant faith and having become a kafir, has defiantly disobeyed Allah's commands and has become a fasiq, and has crossed all boundaries of oppression and has become a dhalim. The Qur'an has many times says, Wallahu la yahdil qawm al-kafirin. Wallahu la yahdil qawm al-fasiqeen. Wallahu la yahdil qawm al-dhalimin. Allah does not guide the disbelieving people. Allah does not guide the defiantly disobedient people. Allah does not guide the unjust oppressing people. Can a person whom Allah has described amongst those who are not guided guide anyone towards Allah or felicity? Yes, he can only guide people towards perdition and hellfire. In Surah Yunus, Allah emphasizes this point and says, أَفَمَنْ يَهْدِي إِلَى الْحَقِّ أَحَقُّ أَنْ يُتَّبَعَ أَمَّنْ لَا يَهْدِيَ إِلَّا أَنْ يُهْدَى. Is he then who guides to the truth more worthy to be followed, or he who himself does not go aright unless he is guided? We cannot count Muawiya as the Ulil Amr or any such other person to be the Ulil Amr. The Ahlul Sunnah, though accepting him as a Khalifa who assumed power, rightfully do not count him amongst the Khulafa Ar-Rashidun. This is a brief synopsis of Muawiya's Khilafat. There are many things that we can discuss at other occasions, inshallah. But this is what he is, and he claimed to be Ulil Amr, which he did not qualify. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the tawfiq to be able to identify the correct Ulil Amr and follow them and implement their teachings in our life. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi alladhi la ilaha illa huwa al-halimul kareem, ghafirudh dhanbi wa qabilut tawb wa huwal ghafurur rahim. Subhana man sabaqat rahmatuhu ghadaba wa basata al-yadayn bir-rahma. Subhana man lam yukallif nafsan illa duna wus'iha wa afa 'anis sayyiati wa lam yujazi biha. سبحان من لا يزداد ولا معاصي لعباد الله كرما وجودا ولا كثرة الذنوب إلا عفوا وصفحا. نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو العطوف ولا العباد بجودي والأواد ولا المذنبين بحلمي. ونشهد أن محمدا نبيه وحبيبه سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين بعثه رحمة للعالمين صلى الله عليه وآله الداعين إلى سبيل الله بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة قادة الأمم وأولياء النعم ومعدن الرحمة. Mu'mineen, I had intended to discuss a very important subject that affects most of us, if not all of us, and that is upbringing of children. The parents' responsibilities. What are our responsibilities as parents? Parenting and raising a child is an important responsibility which many times we tend to take quite lightly. Two most of the common tendencies amongst us parents is firstly to be within common trends. We want to be like the Joneses. And secondly, make someone else responsible for everything that goes wrong with us. By the time we actually realize what the trends of the time have done to us and our offsprings and our children and our families, many a times it's simply just too late. And we cannot make any amends. Rasulullah Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, as well as all the Aimma alayhimus salam, have stressed this responsibility at various levels and have discussed lots of aspects of this. However, due to the constraint in time, inshallah, I want to discuss a few aspects for our understanding and comprehension, to take a glimpse of what our responsibilities are. So inshallah, starting next week, we will look at this. This should not make us run away from not coming, because by running away, we are not solving a situation or getting a solution. Please do come. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the tawfiq to be able to understand the teachings of the Ahlul-bayt alayhimus salam and implement them in our lives. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. اللهم صل على سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وعلى إمام المسلمين وقائد الغر المحجلين أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب وعلى سيدة نساء العالمين وبذة خاتم النبيين سيدتنا فاطمة بنت رسول الله وعلى السبط الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيد شباب أهل الجنة وعلى أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي عليهم الصلاة والسلام. اللهم صل على مولانا صاحب الزمان. اللهم صل. ما هي آثار البدع والطغيان هادم ابن الشرك والنفاق حاسدي فروع البغي والشكاك صلوات الله والسلام عليه وعلى آبائه الكرام ما اتصلت الليالي والأيام. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه وقل ناظرنا بنظرة منا إليه واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديه وتفضل على أمرائنا المؤمنين بمزيد التوفيقات وازدياد الأقبال وألوف الدرجات. اللهم افعل بنا ما أنت أهل ولا تفعل بنا ما نحن أهل بجاه محمد وآله المعصومين صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.